He watched me through my window for weeks before I finally understood what he wanted. Okay, so this happened a few years ago, but thinking about it still makes my skin crawl. I was living in a small apartment complex near my college campus. It wasn't the best neighborhood, lots of students and families just starting out, but it was cheap and close to everything. My apartment faced a small courtyard, and on the other side was another building. I had big windows and liked to keep the blinds open during the day to let the sunlight in. I worked from home, so I was always there. For a while, I noticed this guy. He lived in the building across the courtyard. Middle-aged, kinda scruffy, always smoking on his balcony. I didn't think much of it at first, people smoke outside all the time. But then I started noticing he was always looking at my window. Not just glancing, but staring. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was being paranoid. But it kept happening. Every time I looked over, he was there, watching. Sometimes he'd be smoking, sometimes he'd just be standing there, hands on the railing. The worst part was he never smiled or waved or anything. Just this intense, unsettling gaze. I started closing my blinds more often, but it felt like he knew. Like he could sense when they were open. There were times I'd peek out and he'd be right there, looking directly at my window. It felt like a game. One evening, I was working late. It was dark out, and I had my desk lamp on. I glanced up and saw him standing on his balcony, but this time he wasn't smoking. He was holding something. It was hard to see in the dim light, but it looked like binoculars. That's when I started to panic. I immediately closed the blinds and turned off the light. I sat there in the dark, heart pounding, trying to figure out what to do. I felt completely exposed and vulnerable. I called my best friend, Sarah. I was practically hyperventilating as I explained what was happening. She told me to call the police, but I was hesitant. I didn't have any proof, just a feeling. I knew they wouldn't take it seriously. Sarah convinced me to at least stay at her place for the night. So I packed a bag and waited until I thought he wouldn't be watching. Then, I quickly slipped out of my apartment and ran to my car. As I was pulling out of the parking lot, I saw him. He was standing on the sidewalk, right next to my car, staring at me. I froze. I couldn't see his face clearly in the darkness, but I knew it was him. He just stood there, unmoving, as I slowly drove past. I spent the night at Sarah's, and the next day, I went to the apartment management office. I told them everything, but they said there wasn't much they could do without concrete evidence. They did say they'd keep an eye on things. That night, I stayed at Sarah's again. The next morning, I went back to my apartment to pack up my things. I decided I couldn't live there anymore. It wasn't worth the constant fear. As I was loading boxes into my car, I saw him again. He was across the street, leaning against a lamppost. He was still watching me. This time, though, he had a small, almost imperceptible smile on his face. It was like he knew he had one. I didn't stick around to find out what he had planned. I got in my car and drove away, leaving most of my belongings behind. I never went back. I moved to a different city a few weeks later. I still think about him sometimes, wondering if he's still out there, watching someone else. I always keep my blinds closed now,